Scott Frost, he's out. Just over 4 seasons at his alma mater, Nebraska, gets the full buyout, $15 million out the door. As Ed Orgeron said, what time do you want me out and what door do you want me out of? Get me out the paint. Give me your overarching thoughts on his tenure as a whole and then the move that just happened week 2 of college football.
Yeah, I think it's disappointing. Face value, when that hire happened, you were excited. They hired one of their own, and not only was it one of their own, but it was one of their own that was a really good football player, a focal point for the team during his tenure there. And they were really good and relevant. So you would think that maybe there would be some way to everyone talks about, bringing back the old school guys and trying to reinstill that. It's that there's a little bit of that, but then there's also that element of understanding what you're dealing with now in terms of kids, because kids are different even from when you and I were coming out of high school, I think, in terms of, their attention span, what motivates them, how they need to be coached. It's just different. And you got to adapt or die. And I don't know how well Scott did that up there during his tenure, because the product and the just flat out lack of discipline on a consistent basis was something that really struck a chord with me, and I couldn't figure it out. So overall, I was just very disappointed. I think the way it was handled was very interesting. Just paying the money. I wonder if it was a little bit of regret for not making the move prior to the season. And the cutthroat, maybe taking care of Scott a little bit and giving him some more money. But, I think maybe the right thing would have been to revamp it heading into the season if you just didn't really feel great about it. I think it was one of those things where you had to be all in this year or all out. They were kind of halfway, half-assing it. And, it's going to be a shakeup. Good chance for Mickey Joseph, though, right now to put his foot forward with the vast majority of the season ahead of him. So, we'll see. But like I said, I think Scott's just, the overall thing was just disappointing. You really want to see that Cinderella story kind of work out, especially again at a place like Nebraska. It's been struggling since Bo left.
Yeah. It's unique to me, man. I agree with everything that you said, and for Scott Frost, like, everybody thought this was a home run hire at the time. They thought that it couldn't be better than getting one of your own back, a guy who had some success at UCF, claimed a national title after a 13-0 season there. And it just didn't work out. Now, I brought this up, and it's easy to kind of, relitigate these things after they happen. But, he had the great season at UCF. Outside of that, it was very lackluster, and you can say that it was program building, part of it. I think he took over a UCF team that had some locker room issues, certainly, but it wasn't a team that was devoid of talent or lacked success in the past before he had gotten there. But, he gets to Nebraska. The thing that it feels like, and I hate saying this because it feels like an indictment on a coach that he can't get things right, but it felt like it was everything but football. It felt like more of a culture thing where guys were undisciplined, as you mentioned. You lose that many close games. It feels like, the 2 or 3 plays that swing a game, typically they just couldn't lock in for, whether that was a turnover, whether that was a penalty. And it all just kept snowballing, and he couldn't stop the momentum from going in the wrong direction. And that's a bad spot to be in. You mentioned the fact that they didn't make the move in the offseason. And I think that Trev Alberts coming in as AD wanted to try to do the right thing, give Scott Frost another chance, said, listen, your defense hasn't really been an issue. This offense is a problem. Bring in a new staff. He made a weird move, bringing in Mark Whipple, who's a guy he had never worked with before. A guy who is known in college football circles as stubborn as hell too. And Scott Frost is very headstrong. And that felt like a weird relationship. And then they get together. The offense is a little disjointed, as you could probably imagine, but the defense took a huge step back up to this point, which is shocking to me because I think Eric Shenander is a great coordinator. Just everything was bad about it. And you make the move in week 2 for a couple of reasons. Is number one, you got one conference loss, but outside of that, you tell me who has a better roster in the West. And then, number two, you get a jump start on the coaching search before anybody else gets to engage with candidates. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they can salvage it. It's the next thing up on the topic list, but feels like they're in position in the side of the division that you want to be in at this point. So with Mickey Joseph taking over, and he's a guy who was most recently at LSU, worked with the wide receivers there during national championship year, was the associate head coach, guy who played quarterback at Nebraska. I look in that locker room, and I think that a different voice goes a long way because they've never really been out of it. They've been extremely close, but I don't know if you can flip that mentality quickly enough. What do you think?
No, I mean, I it's hard to do that, man. And I've said this over and over again. I think this next hire needs to be a home run. I think if they screw this up, it's going to be 3 more years, or not screw this up, but if they don't hit it the right way, it's going to be 3 more years of turmoil. And at that point in time,
what does a home run look like though? Like put expectations around that. What does a home run actually look like? Because they thought that 10 wins or 9 wins a year wasn't good enough.
Yeah, no, I know. And I think that's where they have to adjust their expectations. And here's a perfect example. And I hate to go back to using, some of my experiences, but I think it's a good one. Is after the sanctions, Penn State hired Bill O'Brien, never been a head coach before, coordinator in the league, coordinator, assistant throughout, Duke, Maryland, so on and so forth in the college ranks. But the way Bill handled that in terms of engagement, some of the first calls he made was to the entire alumni association, wanted all the lettermen to get back, get engaged, feel welcome, let these kids understand what Penn State football meant. He did things outside of the building, and then also brought a level of expectation, competitiveness, and structure from a football standpoint into the building at a time when it was unprecedented in college football. I argue this with everybody just having been in the locker room, understanding him, understanding how he talked about it. And things have changed since then, I would assume, but I can only go on what I know. I don't think Penn State could have hired a better guy to do the job that was asked of him.
I don't disagree with you.
Similarly, in this situation, it's not because you have sanctions and you have kids who, now you can because of the transfer portal, but kids who can just pick up and leave wherever they want. You got coaches posted up in your campus, all kinds of stuff going on, a lot of turmoil, nuts. You don't have that. But I think that there's probably maybe there's a challenge of overcoming the expectation, getting people involved, allowing people to understand what the expectation should be, and being able to paint that picture, and not only paint that picture, but show progress as you go, right? Whether it be on the product, how you engage with your alumni and your lettermen. I think that the more buy-in you could get from top to bottom, east, west, everybody involved, I think that's going to be better than I think the way Scott came in, where he was kind of coming in like, yep, I did it. I was here. I did it. And I think he kind of kept it. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a Nebraska guy, but I would assume just by the way it seemed in terms of the disengagement from everybody else, that it was very like us against the world, kept it kind of blocked in. So I think you really need someone who understands the entirety of the situation and like really the urgency of the situation. Because Nebraska is a national brand, but at the end of the day, as we all know, if you don't win, the national brand stuff and the history like that goes away, and you need to start winning, and you need to start taking steps in the right direction in order to salvage it. And that's why I said, I think you need to find somebody who can handle it top to bottom, all the facets of the program, and really re-energize it from the fans, from the lettermen, from the guys in the locker room. And then they need to be a great football coach, because at the end of the day, like you said, I think although the roster is talented, there's still some holes. Getting someone with some ties either down south in Texas or out in California from a recruiting standpoint could be good, because they do need to go and start pulling from those areas, which have traditionally been areas where they pulled from. So
no doubt,
I think that's what I mean by a home run. You need someone who like is going to approach this holistically.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And, this idea that they have to be a Nebraska person or have Nebraska ties, I think is overrated. And, again, not to punch down, but I think one of the things that happened with Scott Frost is you kind of walk in there and it's, this is Nebraska. This is a place where we won championships. And, I was in the facility a couple of weeks ago, and they got championship trophies from the 90s. I was born in 94. I believe that was the year they won a championship. The trophy says Sears on it. Sears doesn't freaking exist anymore. Like, we're in such a different place in the world right now.
Yeah, these kids have no idea.
The history doesn't resonate with them. It doesn't do it because they weren't around when Nebraska was that place. And so I think you need to embrace what you've been, but I also think you need to spin it forward into what you should be and what you can be. And so it's a very difficult spot, and expectations are always going to be high. I think you said it. I agree with it. Like, we got to reevaluate what expectations are for Nebraska in this day and age. And I'm not saying you can't build it back into a national contender, but just to assume because it's Nebraska, it's going to be like that, I think is also a difficult spot. But as we go through this, I got a list of coaching candidates. I'm going to read them off. And then if anybody, after I'm done, resonates with you, let me know. So we got Lance Leipold, who's a coach at Kansas right now. He's got 4 wins at Kansas. I know a lot of people would kind of yawn at that, but it is Kansas. We have to keep in mind. They have a win over Texas. And when he was at Wisconsin Whitewater, I believe his overall record was 109-6, and he won some national titles there. So he's had success coaching college programs. Dave Aranda, we know what he's done. He's been a hell of a coordinator. Big Ten ties. He was down at LSU when they won the championship. He's got this Baylor thing freaking rolling right now. And that was a program that could have been dead based off of what happened over there. Mark Stoops, and I think he's got a really good job right now. He's exceeding expectations at Kentucky, which is a basketball school. They're paying him handsomely, but he's got the recruiting ties in the South. He's in kind of bridging the gap to the Midwest. He's recruited Ohio well. So he's got some natural Big Ten ties in there for recruiting. Your guy, Bill O'Brien, I respect him. You mentioned what he did at Penn State. We played at the same time in the conference. What he was able to do at that moment with what your program was going through, I don't think can be overstated. Like that, it was a difficult spot to be in, and he bridged that gap. He kept that program alive. That place could have literally died. It literally could have died, and he prevented that from happening.
Yep.
Jim Leonard is the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. I think he is phenomenal. Just in as a coordinator, he's never been a head coach, so that'll be the question there. Matt Rule, really good in college, struggling in the NFL right now. You got Matt Campbell, who's at Iowa State, and he's got a winning record. I think it's first time since the 70s when Earl Bruce was coaching there that a coach has been able to maintain a winning record at Iowa State. Luke Fickell, Cincinnati head coach, we obviously know what his resume is, took them to college football playoff. First time a group of 5 team has done that. Urban Meyer's name has popped up. That is a real interesting one. It's a guy I played for. I love him to death. I think he's a phenomenal coach. We obviously know the baggage. Think it'd be a really hard sell to a lot of people who want to make a splash hire. Get a lot of backlash off of that one. And then one guy who's not on the list, but I think would be worth kicking the tires on. I tweeted this the other day. Tom Herman, who had a lot of success at Houston. He was 32-18 at Texas. And I know that's not the standard there, but he had a 10-win season in there, won a Sugar Bowl, got the Big Ten ties. He coached at Iowa State as a coordinator, so he's got natural recruiting ties to that region. He grew up on the West Coast. You mentioned being able to go into California. Obviously, with the Texas ties, I think that's big too, because Nebraska was great when they could recruit Texas. That's a guy I would kick the tires on. Don't know if he would be a legit candidate. Out of that list, anybody stand out to you?
I think that last one was a great one. You know, I think with Aranda, it's going to be really hard to pull him away. Same thing with Mark Stoops. You know, it's almost like they're doing, and they've put in the effort at their respective schools to do what you're going to have to basically go back to step one at Nebraska and do. And at the end of the day, like, realistically speaking, facilities, like all that stuff, like maybe Nebraska has more money to throw at it and all this stuff, but how much does that matter anyway now? So I think it's like one of those things where if you have a good thing, I don't think these coaches are going to be as apt to just pick up and leave and head to the next one, unless it's a really good situation, like something where the foundation's already poured. You just gotta build your structure and how you want things ran. Like I said, I think this one's a lot more like you gotta grate the field. You gotta get everything
Yeah.
going, get all there's just a lot more that goes into this, run the plumbing. So, um, I think you need a guy who has experience. I don't think you can take like a first time head coach. What do you think about that? I think it's going to be tough to
Man,
take a first time head coach into this situation. I think it's riskier to do that. It
it's
might work out, but I think you need someone who's done it before.
I was going back and forth on that very idea. I think Nebraska fans are going to want to splash. So, like, to get some of these guys, Dave Aranda or a Stoops, for example, they're going to have to pay him like $10 million a year. And
Yeah.
I'm being realistic here. So, you gotta have some wherewithal to want to offer that type of a contract. The first time thing is real interesting to me. And it popped up when I made the tweet about Tom Herman. And somebody was like, oh, why are we giving these guys second chances and retreads and this, whatever the case is? Like, he was a failed coach at Texas and he didn't live up to the standard at Texas. I was very hard on him in his tenure there. Looking back
hold on though. But that's one of those things that I think is very similar to this situation, right? Like Texas got they were as entitled of a university and athletic program and fan base as there ever has been. They haven't won since Vince Young.
Bingo. And so like
Colt McCoy.
You gotta put the context around it. Like that is a difficult spot. And that's where I had to reevaluate some of my thoughts on what Tom Herman did when he was there. Like, was it their standard? No. Was it awful? Like people are acting like he didn't win any games there. And so maybe he's got the foresight on what to do differently going into a place like that. But why I bring this up is people act like he's a bad coach because of the one stop. And history would tell you that he was successful as a coordinator. He was successful, very successful at Houston. Who's to say that he can't have that success again? And who's to say that one of these guys that we think is a really good coach who's had success before can't go to Nebraska and mess it up like Tom Herman did at Texas or like Scott Frost just did at Nebraska? Like that is the literal example. Oh, we want to get a guy. We want to get a guy. Well, you had a guy and it didn't work out. And so the first time head coach thing to me stands out because I don't think that we can use past success as a head coach as a legitimate indicator that somebody could take a job like Nebraska and make success out of it. I think that's why the vetting process is going to be so important for Trev Alberts. So I'm 50-50 on it. I think that you want a guy who's been there before. I think you want that, but I don't know if it's a necessary attribute for a guy to have success there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I agree with you. It's just one of those things where like I always lean on experience, man. Like there's times to grow and there's opportunities to grow. But like I said, I think when you look at Nebraska, the urgency that is needed, I don't think you can grow with somebody because at the end of the day, no matter who you've been around, how you've done it, until you're actually driving that ship, it's different. So that's why I said I think you need someone who has experienced both failures and success in that seat so they know they can learn from it, bring that with them, and then also evaluate this situation single-handedly. And that's where like a Bill comes into account because I think he got some taste of stuff at the NFL, maybe got in over his skis with the GM thing, and now he's back down in Alabama trying to figure things out, but he's a blue-collar guy. The fan base and the Nebraska fan base will definitely resonate with that, but it's tough, man. And I'll tell you one that my guy Bryce Petty threw out is Art Briles. Getting someone who's been out of the game for a little bit, really hungry to come back and start coaching the X's and O's. I don't know if Art's that guy, obviously, because of everything that went on with that whole situation, but
I don't think you can hire him. I think he is. He's got more stink on him than Urban Meyer. And just reading the tweets from half of the Nebraska fan base on if you could bring Urban in, like that, what happened with Art Briles coaching at Baylor, I think is in this climate that we're in socially would be a really hard sell. And for me personally, like, I don't know if I could get behind that if I was a fan there. Like the X's and O's part, I know he's a phenomenal coach, but like that was wild.
Yeah.
So,
but my point being is someone who has been sitting, is hungry, has some experience, has not been around the game, but wants to get back in and is motivated. I think someone like that could be a
That's
decent
the
hire.
interesting thing. And again, I keep bringing up Tom Herman. I guess I got to put this out in the air. I haven't
I
talked
agree
to
with
the
you.
guy since I left Ohio State. So this is not like, one of my buddies that I'm on a PR campaign for. Like we don't have a professional relationship at this point, but like the dude's in the booth with CBS right now. Like
Yep.
you could hire the guy in November feasibly and he could come into the program right away. So all that to say, this idea that maybe there is a guy who's on the sideline right now, and there are multiple guys probably at that point in their career that are hungry to get in. I think that's a great thought that you had, because why not? Like, they see from a different worldview when they're not in the game right now. Again, the ability to come in probably earlier than any of the candidates that you'd be looking at that are currently coaching is probably a benefit. You get a jump start on recruiting. You can get a jump start on laying the foundation of what you want your culture to be. You can make the connections and have the conversations with the boosters and the alumni and all the important people that you need to kind of politic with to have success. Like that, I feel like that's that would give a unique edge to this situation right now. But I'm sure this isn't the last time we're going to be talking about Nebraska and their coaching search throughout the season. So
no doubt, man, no doubt. But I mean, I hope they figure it out. Like just for the health of the conference. And when does it go back from divisions too? When does it go? When are we doing away with the East West?
I think when USC and UCLA come in, I think it's going to be divisionless football. Yeah.
So 2 years, right? So that's the thing too, is like, at least right now, if you get a guy, they got 2 years to kind of battle in a wide open West.
You make them run.
Like, you know what I mean? And Mel Tucker did it up at Michigan State, right? You can do it in the transfer portal. Lincoln Riley is doing it right now at USC. Like, that dude hit on every single one of the guys he pulled. So, you got to have a great talent evaluator. And in today's day and age, you can turn it around quick, but
you can make a run.
You got to hit. And that's why I think the hire's so important.
What's going on, guys? Rob Doster here, the founder of the Field of 68 and the Field of 12 Media Networks. I wanted to take a quick minute to let you guys know about an exciting new project that we have been working on for the last 3 months. The Almanac, an all-encompassing preview of the 2022-23 college basketball season. We spoke with every single Division I head coach to give you a robust and accurate preview for all 363 Division I college basketball teams. We have predictions for conference finishes for all 32 leagues. We have features on the best freshmen, the best big men, the breakout stars, the coaches on the hot seat, so much more. It is 600,000 words of sheer happiness for the college basketball fan in your life. The Almanac is going to be available for digital purchase on September 26th for just $19.99, but you can pre-order it today using the promo code HOOPS and save 20%. Just hit the link in the description below.